everybody, I am Bacon Ninja, and today in the world of FPV, if you want a digital feed in your goggles, that nice, juicy, crystal clear digital image in your FPV feed, you really only have two choices for people that are actually in the market at the moment. One of them is DJI, which great system, great clarity, has some drawbacks, hasn't been updated in a while, and we don't have any new hardware on the horizon from them. The other, HDZero, or Sharkbite, but we're going to call it HDZero because they've been putting out new products under their own product line, and I think they deserve all the credit for those things. So from here on out, it's just HDZero. And they just put out the 1-watt Freestyle VTX. It's the most output power they've had from a VTX yet. It is single board, and is it the final nail in the coffin of analog? Today we're going to focus on one aspect, one small hammer swing, if you will, of what could be the final nail in analog's coffin, brought to bear by the recent release of HDZero's 1-watt Freestyle VTX, which I just so happen to have crammed, not crammed, it fits actually really well, in the back of my AxisFlying Manta, and that is milliwatt for milliwatt performance. So historically, HDZero transmitters have been fairly limited in the amount of output power they have been able to achieve. And that's mostly because the people over at HDZero and DiviMath just aren't RF engineers. They designed the silicon for the digital transmission and the digital encoding to be sent out over the RF section, but they're just not RF guys. And they're really trying their best, and with this, we finally got something we can compare to high-end analog transmitters. To dig into this, I've got two drones. One of them has the HDZero 1-watt Freestyle VTX in it, and the other has a Rush Tank Solo, which is a very premium analog transmitter capable of outputting powers at or above, disclaimer legally, 1 watt. Some people say it does output more than 1 watt, but it says on the package 1+ watts. We're not quite sure what that means, and no, I do not have an RF power meter. But we do know what this one's rated at, and people have recently rated this HDZero Freestyle VTX running on raceband 1 at, or very close to, at a full 1 watt of output power. Now on both of these drones, I am using the exact same electronics as far as stack and ESC go, not that that matters for this test, but I'm also using the exact same transmitting antenna for the 5.8 gigahertz band, and that is the Lumineer Axi 2. In one of them, I have a Lumineer Axi 2 that uses a MMCX connector, which would go for the Rush Tank Solo, and the other, I have the exact same antenna in its UFL variant for the HDZero Freestyle VTX. Now also in both of these, I have an Express LRS Happy Model EP1 receiver, and I have turned off telemetry transmission for both of these drones, because as you can see, the Immortal T's are very close to my 5.8 gigahertz reception, and I don't want to be transmitting anything that may dirty up some of these tests. So what will I be doing with these drones, you might ask? Well, they're drones, so I'm going to fly them. But actually I'm going to fly them twice. So the first test that we're going to look at is a line of sight test where I just take off, fly 1,800 feet forward, turn around, and come back to home. And I'm going to go ahead and put a map of that up on the screen for you so you can see the loop that I traveled. And as you'll notice, there is a yellow arrow, and that denotes the direction I am looking at during the test. And that is important because on the receiving side of things, I am using the Sharkbite VRX to receive my HDZero transmission, as well as the default analog module inside of my Skyzone O4Ls. I believe it's called a Rapid Mix, or they may have changed the name recently, to receive my analog signal. As far as antennas go, obviously I'm using the built-in patches on the HDZero Sharkbite equipment with a pair of matched Fox-ear lollipops for the right-hand circular polarized omnis. For analog, I took one of the lollipops, put it on the default module, and to make it fair, I use this little PCB patch, which has about the same gain rating as the ones on the Sharkbite system, so that I'm using one patch and one omni to pick up my analog signal. Let's go ahead and take a look at the test for HDZero in line of sight. All right, so I take off from the home point here. Video is nice and crystal clear. I'm not very far from myself. In the top right, the antenna reception looking pretty good, mostly greens. I'm about halfway through the 1,800 feet here, There's going to be a road come up in the distance on the horizon, and I'm going to flip around when I get close to that point because I don't want to be anywhere near traffic. If we start to get closer to that, there's a few sparkles that come in, but as I bank around this turn, the sparkles get pretty consistent. They stick with me for a while here. I think that's because I am using the Axie that does not stick out from the frame much. It's kind of a button style antenna. A lot of freestyle pilots do use those, so I think it's perfectly valid to use it for testing. But I've put the battery between myself and the transmitting antenna. So now I've limited my reception a little bit, but the closer I get to home, the better the reception gets. Nothing unflyable here. Totally reasonable. Right, that was a pretty good baseline for what HDZero has to offer in a very limited 1,800-foot run. There wasn't anything unflyable there. We got some sparkles. That's to be expected, especially with the antenna that I usually run on my freestyle drones. I was definitely expecting that to start. And if I didn't say it before, I am running the 1-watt power output mode on this VTX. I did unlock it. I am licensed to do so in the United States. Therefore, I will use every milliwatt provided to me by the law. So let's go ahead and take a look at the same exact run on a different drone. Well, close to the same exact. I tried my best to make it the same exact, but on my other drone with the 1-watt analog output. And as we take off from the home point again, I'm already disappointed in the resolution of analog and want to go back to HDZero. But in all seriousness, about halfway through we start getting some color banding, probably due to the mixing receiver mixing the antenna signals rather than giving me static or dropping to black and white. It's color banding there. As we get more than 3/4 or so out of the way, we start to get a little bit of breakup, and as we turn the corner, we get plenty of color banding there, and then some breakup. But again, just like with the HDZero system, I put my battery between myself and the transmitting antenna, and I'm using a transmitting antenna that is not very tall, like most freestyle pilots would, so they don't rip it off in a crash. And it's going to stay this way till about halfway back to home, very similar to what happened with the HDZero system. We're going to keep a little bit of that color banding out there in the sky and get a little breakup every now and then, but definitely completely flyable here. Obviously, this test was not in any way designed to be a range test, and I hope you don't take it as one. It was only over 1,800 feet, is a very short distance, and I really just put it together to milliwatt for milliwatt, see how the breakup came in and when it came in between the HDZero Freestyle VTX and 1 watt of analog output. And I have to say, it's very comparable between the two. The amount of breakup we got and the spots at which we got the breakup were what I expected after flying analog for months. The HDZero system did it right when I had anticipated that it would, and about to the degree that I had anticipated it would. So for test 1, I would say both of these systems, milliwatt for milliwatt, performed equally. Moving on to test 2, we're going to take a look at what the breakup looks like when you are on the far edges outside of the reach of your patch antenna and you are about 800 feet away behind some trees, maybe some hills, things like that that are very common in maybe a park flying scenario or just a light freestyle scenario. So let me show you a map of what I put together for this one. As you can see, my starting location is in the exact same spot and I am facing in the same direction. However, I will be flying off to my left behind trees and a man-made dirt hill. They're doing some construction over there. So I'm flying behind that dirt hill and a thicket of trees that is between me and the drone in my line of sight. And for this test, we're going to take a look at analog first, so let's jump right into that one. We're going to jump straight behind these trees 800 feet away, and you can see the breakup is pretty significant right out of the gate. Now I do have a couple of large trees, maybe this bush a little bit in the way, and a dirt berm between me and the drone, and I'm flying pretty low to the ground here. But the breakup stays fairly consistent behind these trees, and as I come out of them, it goes virtually away. Now I'm going to turn back around and into the trees, and the breakup starts to come right back, and as I get through that thicker tree, there it is again. Totally flyable though. As far as analog goes, I would totally fly through that. Obviously I did totally fly through this breakup. Really no big deal. I'm going to go through the middle of this tree, and as I start to go through it, pretty bad color banding. I go black and white and get a lot of breakup, but I can get through it just fine. I'm fairly comfortable with the scraggle there, so it really wasn't that big a deal. Now I'm going to go straight behind this dirt berm, Start to get some color banding there and some breakup. As I pop out over it, it goes right away. So using that analog run as a baseline, let's take a look at how HDZero did in the exact same area. Now to remind you, I am flying off to my left, which is outside of the reach of the built-in Omni antennas on the SharkBite HDZero VRX. So I'm just running on Omnis for this one. Let's take a look. Again, I'm gonna come straight for this tree, and as I get behind it, things go horribly. And I just have to punch out. That's the thing about HDZero breakup, is when it gets to a certain point, you get this rainbow screen, and then you are just totally screwed. You can't fly out of it, so you just punch up. Now, down here in this part, I would say that HDZero, for a minute there, was doing better than analog until I got close to that tree. Got the rainbow screen again. Now I'm gonna take another stab at it. A lot of breakup, rainbow screen, almost rainbow screen out. I have to punch out of that one. Now at this point, I actually turned my body to face the patches toward the tree because I knew there was no chance of me getting through it. So as I turned my body and faced the patches toward it, the breakup still exists, but I do not rainbow screen this time. I'm able to make my way through it. Now I'm gonna fly over to the same dirt berm that I tested with analog, and again, start rainbow screening, getting a lot of breakup there. Now I'm gonna flip around here in a second. Oh, terrible rainbow screen. I'm gonna flip my whole drone around and face the antenna a different direction, and it's not nearly as bad. So it's obvious the more obstacles you have, the worse the reception is gonna be. That's just the way physics works, totally to be expected. And as you take obstacles out of the way, things get better. And you'll notice in that last test, when I turned around behind the berm, I actually got better reception. That's because, again, my battery was not between the receiving antenna and the transmitting antenna, and it was just a little bit better. But the thing that really gets me about that last test was the breakup on HDZero and going to the rainbow screens. If you look back to what we did with the analog in the same area, I could fly through it the whole time. Now again, it does have a mixing receiver, and that may be playing a part into that. If I didn't have a decent mixing receiver, it may have been a different story, and I may have just fuzzed out and had to punch up, like I did with the HDZero system when it rainbowed. But I will say, as far as milliwatt for milliwatt, it's very, very similar. The range is very similar. The penetration, however, is slightly different because you don't have the ability to always fly through HDZero breakup. So is the HDZero 1 watt Freestyle VTX the final nail in analog's coffin? I don't think it is today. I think it comes a long way to trying to close the lid, but I don't think it's ready to swing the hammer yet. I think milliwatt for milliwatt, they perform very comparably. But the difference in the breakup makes milliwatt for milliwatt a little bit null as you get to the edges of your ability to fly. So in analog, I can fly in black and white, almost all fuzz, as long as I can make out some shapes. With HDZero, it just gets really hard when you rainbow screen. You've got to punch out, and if you're in the middle of a trick when that happens and you punch out and you punch into the ground because you're not so sure where the sky is at the moment that it happens, you're going to destroy your drone. Now, that's not a knock on HDZero, because I think over time you could learn when to expect that rainbow and know the limits of the output power of your VTX and where you should and shouldn't fly, just like everybody learns on analog after they've gotten to a few sticky situations. I also think that analog still has some legs because it's so cost effective, especially in a category like micros where we don't have a good 1S HDZero board yet. They are coming out with that. They're working on it right now, but it's not out yet. And we'll see what it does to the market once it does come out. I think it could put a large dent in the analog whoop, tiny whoop, and sub 4-inch market at some point. And things like the Freestyle VTX coming out with 1 watt, but the cost by the time you add the VTX, a camera, an antenna, a VRX module, and analog goggles to receive it with is about the same as DJI. And I think people looking to switch from analog to digital are really drawn to DJI because of its resolution. And at the end of the day, that's how they make their decision and that's where their money goes. For me, that's not gonna be the case. I'm gonna go with HDZero all the way. I believe in their contribution to the community. I believe in their innovation. They have come out with a lot of new products. They're getting nothing but better. I'm hoping that we can get some products in stock would be terrific. That's happening slowly, but I think over time it will get better. And I think a lot of other manufacturers of VTXs are going to adopt the DiviMath chipset so that they can start making their own VTXs outside the HDZero line using the technology. So that's where I want to be. And for me, this VTX being 1 watt of output power for my 5-inch freestyle drones is the nail in the analog coffin. You might not feel the same way, but if nothing else, I hope this video was helpful in that it showed you some comparisons, milliwatt for milliwatt, in a couple of pretty common scenarios between HDZero's freestyle 1 watt VTX and 1 watt of output power from an analog system. If it has been helpful, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down and giving this video a like so that maybe some other people will see it and they'll get some use out of it as well. And if you wouldn't also mind in the comments, let me know if you'd like to see anything else related to the HDZero line of products. I'd love to do a few more videos on that. I am working on one to show you how to flash and unlock the 1 watt VTX, because I think a lot of tutorials are missing, because it hasn't ever existed before, the unlock step for the 1 watt VTX. And the instructions, unless you've read them a few times, can be a bit tricky. So I want to make a video about that. But if there's anything else that you would like to see about HDZero, leave it in the comments below. And until next time, I'll catch you later.